In a market where almost everyone believes that the housing market is going to crash, the Fed continues to push up interest rates, mortgage rates have moved over 7%, and home sales have fallen to extreme lows, it's hard to think that there are markets that will appreciate in 2023. Well, in this video, I want to share some things to look out for to find a good market, but also share what the top 10 markets are to invest in 2023. But I don't want to waste your time, so let's go ahead and dive right in. When it comes to real estate, it's important to see that prices are cyclical. They go up during the summer, and then they go back down during the winter. And this is a big reason why most economists look at prices year over year and not month over month. Now, there were some markets that went crazy year over year, and we're seeing sharp declines. So when you're looking for a good market to invest in, you need to consider what does the growth rate look like. For example, in Austin, from June 2019 to June 2022, home prices are up 82%, but year over year, they're only up 14%. So we are seeing a sharp decline in home price appreciation. However, where I'm at in Augusta, Georgia, from June 2019 to June 2022, home prices are up 32%, whereas year over year, they're up 15.5%, which is a substantial difference. With all that being said, I think that month over month can be important to determine what is going on when it comes to the rate of slowdown in an individual market. So there are 4 things that impact prices that you can use to evaluate your city to understand your local market. And I firmly believe that if you are planning on investing in real estate or are thinking about buying a house, knowing these 4 things and how they function could help you make a great decision for buying real estate. These 4 fundamentals that affect housing prices are demographics, interest rates, inflation, and inventory. Now, I think we can all understand that mortgage rates don't fluctuate much between states, so we won't spend much time on it. Inflation is for the most part a national issue, so there isn't much of a difference between local markets. However, I think the 2 most important ones are demographics and inventory. So that is where we're going to focus in order to understand not only why these top 10 markets are expected to have solid couple of years, but how you can use these fundamentals to help you understand your current market. Millennials have overtaken the baby boomers as America's largest generation in April of 2020. And this is significant because millennials are at peak family formation and home buying age. Even though in 2019 it was said that millennials prefer to rent over buy, unfortunately there are only so many homes that can be rented. And once millennials start having families, they will either choose to rent homes at a much more expensive price, live in apartments which for a family can be difficult, or start buying homes using an FHA loan where they can have a low down payment. Now, the question becomes, if millennials are starting to have families, where is all this taking place? The Honest Company, which is a company that I'm invested in, shared that 42% of baby births are happening in the Southeast. This could either mean that families want to have a lot of kids in the South, or I think a more appropriate answer is that people are wanting to move to the Southeast to actually start having a family. But even though there are a lot of new families in the Southeast, one of the biggest metrics to pay attention to for your city is population growth rate. It is one thing to have your city grow 20% in a year, but if there isn't consistent growth, then the city may not be as reliable as you think. This is why it is a good idea to look for cities that have had solid growth for the last 5 to 10 years. And speaking of growth, we want to be able to look for cities that have both population growth and job growth. If we see unemployment higher in certain areas, then home prices could have higher fluctuations. So it's important to look for cities that are unlikely to experience a lot of foreclosures. Now, I've heard it said that foreclosures have increased drastically, and this isn't completely true. The problem is that many people are comparing it to last year, and with all the stimulus checks and support from the government, of course the numbers are going to be higher. But what people don't hear is what the numbers are like now compared to pre-pandemic levels when there wasn't all the government support. Adam Data Solutions looked at the foreclosure data, and here's what they got. August foreclosure starts were at 86% of the number of foreclosure starts in August of 2019. But it's important to remember that even then, foreclosure activity was relatively low compared to historical averages. Now, think about it. In 2019, home prices were much lower than where they are right now, and a ton of people were buying homes at these high prices in 2020 and 2021. So even with these increased prices, the foreclosures are still lower than 2019. Now, for transparency, I do see these numbers continuing to rise even higher than 2019 levels, especially as unemployment rises. But we cannot assume that foreclosures will be as high as before because of the kinds of loans people have and how low mortgage delinquencies are. So look for cities themselves that will appear to have low amounts of mortgage delinquencies and foreclosures. When we look at inventory, we want to look for cities that are seeing low inventory despite the US overall continuing to increase. If we look at the active listing count, which is the count of active single family multifamily and condo or townhome listings, we can see that we are nowhere near normal levels, even with the drastic increase of homes on the market. Now, yes, this doesn't include multifamily, but I will talk more about that later. There are so many news headlines that are talking about how high inventory is. However, looking at the data, that's simply not true. The next metric that I believe is important to look at is monthly supply. If we were to look at this at surface level, it appears that we are at extreme levels. But here's the thing about monthly supply. The houses that are included in this data are anything that is for sale. They could be houses that haven't been complete yet or homes that need a full renovation. This is why there are a lot of people who believe that the housing market is being flooded with supply. So what we need to do is look for areas that don't have extreme pressures of supply, especially if the city doesn't have the strongest population growth. Now, multifamily housing has increased, and there are certain cities where we have seen drastic increases in apartment buildings and condos. But here's what we need to consider. What are families wanting? Knowing that millennials are now the largest generation in the world and the generation is at peak buying age, what does that say about the multifamily space? I can see these 3-bedroom apartments and townhomes going quick, but that affects rents and not home prices. Plus, we are nowhere near the amount of homes that we need even for multifamily. The National Apartment Association said that the US will need 4.3 million units by 2035 to keep up with demand. And in order to ease the affordability crisis, we need 600 units right now. At some point, those families are probably going to want to move to single family or smaller multifamily properties, and our supply as a nation is still not where it needs to be. A new study reported that we are behind on 3.8 million homes for meeting housing needs, and this is important for looking at the best cities to buy real estate. We want to look for areas that will have low supply and will continue to have high demand because people are moving there, and the amount of multifamily and single family homes are not keeping up with the migration into the city. What I'm seeing is that people are moving from less affordable areas to more affordable areas. And what we will see in Moody's Analytics, most of these areas are still in the Southeast. 6 out of the 10 cities that they believe to experience the highest appreciation are in the Southeast. They are in Albany, Augusta, Columbus, and Valdosta, Georgia, and New Bern and Rocky Mount, North Carolina. I've said this numerous times on my channel, but as someone who lives around Augusta, not only are homes still selling at a pretty fast pace, but there are a lot of people moving here. In 2020, Money.com had Evans, Georgia, which is about 15 minutes northwest of Augusta, as the #1 place to live. The problem is that we now have a lot of people moving here, so that inventory has struggled to keep up with demand. And this is why I agree with Moody, at least for Augusta and the cities around it. This is a major reason why I'm a buyer in this current environment. Not only do I see the likelihood for appreciation in my area, but rents have continued to go up as well. Once again, because of the lack of housing. Don't get me wrong, we have seen an increase in supply, but it's important to note that there are very specific houses which are not selling, and they are homes above 400,000. Now, I know for some of you, you'll probably think that these prices are cheap, but we honestly have some of the most affordable housing that I've ever seen. The other 4 cities that are expected to experience solid appreciation are Casper, Wyoming with 8% growth, Hartford, Connecticut at 7.1%, 6.5% growth in Farmington, New Mexico, and Danville, Illinois with 6.3% growth. Now, what I think is important to consider is the amount of growth that these markets are projecting to experience. Albany is expected to rise 9.8%, whereas Danville, Illinois is expected to grow 6.3%. Even though Moody's Analytics says that the worst city will decline over 12%, I'm expecting the market to only fall about 5 to 10%. I think that there will be some markets that fall more than 12%, but those are going to be the markets that have rapid inventory increases and are seeing slow population growth, if any. But as I said before on my channel, I don't see a crash because not every market is experiencing the crash that some people are seeing. And if you notice, many people who are expecting a crash in the housing market are in areas that saw massive appreciation, and those areas are now seeing good sized cuts in prices. And so to move the entire real estate market 20% will be extremely difficult in my opinion. Let me put it this way. During the Great Recession, guess how far prices dropped nationally? According to the St. Louis Fed, the median home price decreased almost 20%, and many would say that it was real estate that was a major catalyst for the recession. The current housing environment is much different from the Great Recession in 2008, and here's why. First, the market inventory is still low in comparison to normal levels. But the second reason, which I think is much more important, is that we need to consider how much healthier consumers are today than in the past. Also, the financial system is in a much better spot spot than 2008 because how many people were getting loans that shouldn't have been? There were people who were buying multiple homes for themselves when they had an extremely low income. And because of the current financial system, the likelihood of people forcing themselves to sell is low in comparison to the Great Recession. And that leads to foreclosures. If we compare the first half of 2022 to 2008, the numbers are unbelievable. In 2008, they were at 1.8% of all housing units, but right now that number is 0.12. Think about the difference there and what really needs to happen to get back to those numbers. If you are someone who believes in a market crash, we would probably have to see the number of foreclosures 10x to get to the amount of foreclosures that could flood the market with the inventory needed to see a 2008 move. But with all that said, we need to look at local markets and not just the national market. This is why I want to encourage you to look at what your housing markets are doing. But hope you all enjoyed this video, and if you want exclusive content about the real estate market, click the link in the description. Enjoy the rest of your week, and I'll see you in the next one.